Hi, I'm Rachel Abbasi. Welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. As always, thanks for spending time with me. Happy Monday. It's been a hot minute since I recorded. I had a visitor in town and have been doing a lot, so pushing my symptoms to their utmost edge for sure. So I've been doing a lot of sleeping, but I'm here. And what I wanted to talk about today springs from a few things. One of the things I've been pushing my head because I'm writing my book. So I'm still trying to find that, comfortable place where I can put the right amount of effort towards the book and not push myself to the point where I need to take a nap every day. Right now, I'm not there. But what I'm writing about right now is my experience at detox. And I I've been thinking through this idea of how recovery from anything, whether it's uh, drinking, stroke, whatever it is that we're dealing with between our ears, um, there's such a similarity there. It's it feels very much like recovery is physical, and so much of it is emotional recovery is happening between our ears. So I was thinking back to when I was in detox, to this moment when I realized that what I was recovering from, the disease, was not just a physical disease, that it was something that I needed to address inside me. And it's funny, not haha funny, but that I had heard so often in my meetings that sobriety is an inside job. And intellectually, I know what that means, but I still was so focused on controlling my need to pick up a drink physically, to pick it up with my hands. And so when I was in this detox, this was my second trip to detox, I we were walking from the residence hall over to the cafeteria. And so we're pretty close to the street, but we're behind, there's a set of bushes, a line of bushes between our sidewalk and the sidewalk that is beside the street. And as I was walking outside, I thought somebody could just stick a bottle of wine in those bushes. And then I got this fear that what if there was a bottle of wine in those bushes? What would I do? What would my reaction be? I feared that I would not be able to control my reaction, that I wouldn't be able to control my hand from picking up the drink. And it was oblivious to me as I was thinking that through that the problem was not my hand reaching for the drink, it was my mind reaching for the drink. That whether we are suffering, like just just to bring it back to this podcast and how we focus on more than just sobriety, but how these things that we go through in our lives, these episodes of recovery, some of them last throughout our lives. Some of them are short, whether it's grief that we're recovering from, which is typically a shorter period of time, to recovering from stroke, which is lifetime, or a chronic illness, or an invisible illness like anxiety. Um, that what what is so difficult to control is the way that I think, the way that I feel. Recovery is is more than it's not even fixing the problem. Recovery, I say that I'm in full-time recovery. Recovery is my full-time job. Um, And even in the beginning, in stroke recovery or vestibular, I call it vestibular recovery. It's not that that chronic illness is going to go away. It's it's not that I'm going to change necessarily my symptoms. It is learning how to live in this reality that I didn't choose. And that is going back to that moment that that I'm walking outside by this bush and I'm thinking, how am I going to do this? I realized, what if there was a, a bottle of wine in that bush? Well, I realized like I'm going to be walking and living in a world where there's alcohol everywhere. And I don't have control of where that is. I don't have control of that if there's a bottle in that bush. I even used to think that the like I was so fearful of the alcohol itself that it almost became this like living, breathing organism that was just gonna throw itself down my throat. Um, I believed for so long that control was me controlling what was outside of my fingertips. That if I could just manage the world around me, then my thoughts and my reactions and my behavior were not going to be, to have terrible consequences because um, I wouldn't do anything bad if the world would just be better around me. Um, I believed that if I just tried harder, I could control those things outside of me. But my thoughts were what led to my behavior. Like my thoughts were just as out of control as my picking up a drink with my hand. My physical control was equal, or lack thereof, was equal to my mental control. The obsessive thinking and the fear and the just loops, the mental loops. What if this? What if that? How do I stop this? I need to get ahead of this because I'm going out of, I'm getting out of control. So that feeling that alcohol was just going to jump out from behind a bush, um, not that it actually would, but I was preparing for it. um, I was preparing for scenarios that were not realistic. And I had done that my entire life. Um, so in that facility, in that detox facility, the bigger question was not how do I control my hand from picking up a drink when I get out of this joint, but how do I control thinking about the drink? Um, Instead of thinking about unrealistic outcomes, like the alcohol throwing itself down my throat. I mean, I laugh at it, but I was scared. I was scared that I didn't have control. So how was I going to put my body in these different scenarios? I was still trying to understand how am I going to control the world around me with this disease instead of thinking about um, how do I control my response to the world around me? And this is where my recovery, my understanding of recovery deepened. Um, and as I apply that to stroke recovery and vestibular recovery, it's like I was constantly trying to figure out, and I still am, I'm so new to stroke and vestibular recovery. Um, how do I control the world around me? You know, everything moves. So I see that still that same pattern of trying to control what's outside of me rather than trying to control what's within me. And stroke recovery is, and sobriety, it's interesting because when I think about controlling what's within my fingertips in the world of sobriety, it's like, okay, well, at first thought, like, well, I can't control that I'm an alcoholic. Of course not. I can't control that part of what's within my fingertips. I can't control my disease as much as I can't control the world around me, outside that which is outside of my fingertips. I can't control my disease as much as I can't control the world outside of my fingertips. But what I do have the power to control is my response to my disease, my response to the world around me, my choices, and the next right thing, the next action. Um, I can't control my disability as much as I can't stop the world from moving, but I can control my responses. I can control and by that, I don't mean my symptoms, my physical response to the movement around me, but I can control my choices, what I allow myself to be exposed to. Um, in stroke recovery, in vestibular recovery, I really have to pay attention um, to what I'm exposed to with care because I don't want to cut out the world and not be exposed to anything that moves. But yet I can't be exposed to too much that moves. In sobriety, in early sobriety, it was like, do I stop putting myself entirely in the position to be exposed to alcohol? Meaning, I don't go to a restaurant even where people might be drinking, or do I control my choices in that thinking about like what I learned in sobriety is think about what my intentions are. Am I going to this restaurant because I want to be exposed to alcohol and I secretly want to have the opportunity to slide my hand over and pick up a drink real fast, Or what is my intention for showing up? And the same in stroke recovery is like, what is my intention for putting myself in a position where I could trigger my symptoms? Is it, am I just throwing caution to the wind and I'm just like, I don't care. I don't care what my reaction is. I just want what I want and I want it now. Um, it's so parallel for me that it's fascinating. Um, I can't control where alcohol exists. I can't control that my brain how had a stroke. Um, but I can control how I reach out for support or if I reach out for support. I can control if I stay in a vulnerable situation or if I run. I can control, and I feel like this is such an important part of recovery, how I speak to myself. Do I speak kindly to myself or am I beating myself up all the time? So this point at detox where I realized that my disease, my alcoholism, was just as much controlling my physical behavior as it is controlling what's happening between my ears is 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 where I understood or I began to understand that acceptance and surrender. So when I get to this point of acceptance and surrender, same thing with stroke and vestibular recovery, when I realized that this, no doctor's going to be able to help me. There is no medication other than Emgality that can help my headache. Um, that the way I feel physically and emotionally is dependent upon the choices that I make. I This is a point of acceptance where it's like, okay, in sobriety, I'm accepting that I have a disease. And in stroke recovery, I'm accepting that I have a disability. And both of these are permanent. Both of these I will live with for the rest of my life. And what am I going to do with that? Which came first, the acceptance or the surrender? I don't really know the answer to that. Um, because isn't there a point of acceptance that has to happen in order to surrender? But yet, I think we can surrender without having a full understanding of what's happening. Um, I can surrender to outside help without fully wrapping my head around or needing to accept the fact that what I'm dealing with is permanent. You may hear a little bit of laziness in my voice because I'm really triggered right now, and that's why I've been not recording because I'm having a hard time. But we're gonna keep going. So I can surrender to outside help without fully having a grasp of what I'm facing. And that's what my program helps me do is it helps me walk through that long-term process of acceptance. So I surrendered to detox. I surrendered to outside help. I surrendered to my sobriety fellowship. I surrendered to people, to systems that are available. I surrendered to structure, but it felt like in both situations that I had no choice. Um, and that's where I'm like, what came first? Was I accepting that my situation, like, you can no longer do this alone? And then I surrendered. Or did I just fall into the arms of my sobriety program? Did I just fall into the arms of a psychiatrist? Did I just fall into the arms of stroke support groups, vestibular support groups? I don't know what came first, but either way, both are required. Um, None of it's clean, but the best I can do is explain in both of these paths how I responded, how I lived through it. So applying this sobriety, this alcoholism recovery to stroke or any other major health event, like our body does not respond the way that it used to. Um, our body does not process information the same way that it used to. So my independence has shifted. I spent 2 years post-stroke trying to fight it, trying to fix it, trying to get back to the way that I was before. Who has a headache for the rest of their lives? This girl. That's who, apparently. That's who. Um, but that experience of 2 years of trying to fight it and fix it, the disability, the chronic pain, 100% mirrored that time when I knew I had a problem drinking, but I didn't want to join my sobriety fellowship. I was trying to fight it. I was trying to fix it. I was trying to drink the way that I did before. But I cannot force control back into something that has changed forever. Um, there is this process of letting go of who I was. I brought forward who I am, my identity, but there's a lot of capabilities that I didn't have before. So this is interesting because there's a book called Identity Theft. And it's by this organization called Stroke Onward, and they talk about rebuilding your identity or reclaiming your identity or however, whatever careful words are chosen around identity. And part of me struggles with that idea of rebuilding our identity. I think sometimes I think that identity is not lost with a stroke. It depends on how we define identity because I feel like we attach identity to our physical capabilities. While when I look at it from the perspective of drinking, of sobriety, I, throughout all the versions of Rachel that I talk about, Rachel version 1.0 before sobriety, Rachel version 2.0 after sobriety, and Rachel version 3.0 after stroke, I think there is one consistency that lived through all of those versions, and that I would think is my identity. So, when I say I'm letting go of who I was, aren't I really just letting go of what I could do? You know, I'm not letting go of who I was. I'm letting go of the behavior that was killing me. But who I am has been there since I was a little girl. And who I am continues to thrive through all of these difficult times in my life. Accepting who I am now is is continuing to accept who I was as a little girl. Learning to live with who I am from this place, from this moment in time, from these challenges that have been unearthed in my life. So inner recovery, I feel, is recovering that identity through sobriety, through alcoholism, through sobriety, through stroke, through a major health event. Recovery itself, isn't recovery recovering our identity? I mean, yes, it's in a lot of different things that we recover from. It's physical recovery, recovering our ability to walk again, recovering our ability to talk for those who have aphasia, recovering some of those physical abilities. But there is inner recovery work. Um, Depression shows up when I'm not able to meet my own expectations, when reality doesn't match my expectations. Fear shows up when I'm unable to predict and control outcomes. And then obsessive thinking is when I don't trust what is happening. Um, I don't trust what's happening outside of me. I don't trust what is happening within me. But the solution is not more control, is not discipline. It's a change of heart. It's moving from resistance to acceptance, to surrender, whichever one comes first. From moving from why is this happening to me to how do I live with this? How do I, Rachel, my identity, who I am on the inside, who I've always been, how do I live with this? How do I, rather than try to control that which is outside of me, how do I allow myself within my fingertips? How do I participate in life with this? I knew from that moment that I was thinking about that alcohol hiding in the bushes. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to control where the alcohol was in the world. I also knew in stroke recovery and vestibular recovery, I'm not going to be able to control what moves in the world. Um, these these attempts to control what's outside of me is just that fight or flight stuff. Um, and instead, I'm learning that I can focus on my response. I never considered there was a difference between a reaction and a response. Um, my reaction was what I thought was all I had when I thought about that alcohol in the bush. I thought that all I had was a reaction, and I didn't think I had any control of it. Um, but I learned throughout, using the steps of my recovery program, and through listening to those in my fellowship, that sometimes if I start recovery by pausing, it gives me a sense of what the difference is between a response and a reaction. And this is within my fingertips. Um, this is where I can release that need to control the outcome. Um, this is where I can release that need to predict and control the outcome and return to the next right thing. So in stroke recovery, I can't control my symptoms, my reaction, just as much as I can't. If somebody makes me angry and I snap, that is a reaction. And that's what I feel like is equal to my symptoms. If something moves to the point where it triggers my symptoms, it's no different than me emotionally getting angry. My body is getting angry, and it comes out showing as a symptom, as a physical symptom that makes me sick or in pain. So I can't control those symptoms, but I can control my response to it, right? My response, everything in stroke recovery and vestibular recovery requires me to slow down. And that's what a response is. A response is slowing down. A reaction is speeding up. That's what I think about in my head. So I control how I show up. Um, I can't control my thoughts. That's how I felt in early sobriety. Um, but when I slow down and I don't just react to my thoughts, um, I begin to understand that I can control not believing every one of my thoughts. Um, what is it? Fears aren't facts or something like that. But not feeling like I have to react to everything that's going on between my ears. I thought I didn't have a choice. So fear, I don't have to fight or flight. I don't have to resist or run. How about I pause? How about I stay? How about I stay and respond? So, as much as I have been trying to figure this out, I thought initially in early sobriety, I thought that all I had was a drinking problem. But I have learned over the years that I have a thinking problem. I have a control problem. And peace and serenity does not come from me controlling that which is outside of my fingertips. It Peace and serenity comes when I recognize where my control ends, that it ends at my fingertips. And and that's where I learn how to live honestly, courageously, and fully inside this, as I was saying earlier. This is how I learn how to live fully without thinking, why is this happening to me? But accepting and surrendering to this moment, to right now, to inside the space that I'm in the world, in time, right this very moment. Thank you for listening to me go on. I felt this was really good. I felt like it was good. I needed to talk this out. I needed to talk out how did these experiences mirror each other. So this episode is certainly for anyone, isn't it? So thanks for listening, and I will talk to you next time.